Hi, y'all. It's Bridget Cutchall. Today, my guest is Marc Scheff. He is I like to say, a transformational coach, right? Helping people with creativity. Can you say hi, Mark?
How you doing? Thanks for having me. This is gonna be fun.
I really appreciate, that we connected, and I love the aspect that you've taken your creativity aspect to help other people figure out. We always have problems in life, and people get stuck. And I see that's what coaches help people get unstuck, or at least find the right path. What got you into coaching? I'm just curious.
Oh, I'll try to tell the long version in a short way. But I was introduced to coaching about 20 years ago. When I was in San Francisco, I joined a group of men, the Men's Circle, and the purpose of that group was to support men in finding and living their purpose. It was we weren't trying to take over the world. I mean, we were trying to take over the world in a nice way. Um, but we were trying to bring our gifts to the world and support our communities and that kind of thing. And in that group, there were a lot of people who were coaches. And at the time, it was 2004. At the time, I'm like a coach. Like I don't even know what that is. Like, what is that you can do that? But I was really impressed by the power, the transformational power of just simple conversation and reflection. And then, fast forward to COVID, I graduated with computer science degree. I went back to art school. I did a lot of stuff in tech and art, and I was running a nonprofit. And I pitched and got funding for a nonprofit where I was going to run, and we did run art residencies in upstate New York in 2020, in the middle of COVID. And um, you know, putting it lightly, I left the organization, and it was a really really hard time. I had put my heart, my soul, my dreams. I'd put everything into this. I'd asked a lot of my family to give me the time to do this during COVID with two kids at home. It was a really high pressure time. So I want to almost say my introduction to coaching was post-traumatic growth in a way, because I mean when I say it was a hard time, I mean there was like 3 weeks where I really didn't get out of bed. I phoned it in. I was making food for my family. I was getting my kids their activities, but I was just kind of lying down. And I got back in the art studio, and my wife said, "Look, you don't have to just go back to that." She said that, you didn't really seem that happy doing that. I was like, "Oh, that's interesting." So, fortunately, we had the resources. She's like, take the summer, just think, really just take some time. And so what I did was I actually did a creative exercise that I designed from and I'd been sort of in working with coaches, doing some coaching for those 20 years, but really in the art space for the most part. And I did a creative exercise with myself where I got to the core of, what is somebody with the purpose that I believe that I have, what does somebody like me, what does somebody like me do? And I sat down and I've got this up on YouTube. It's called the Joy Compass. And it's really just a series of journal like lists where I kind of hone down, not just like, well, that seems interesting. Maybe I'll try that, but really looking at everything that I've done and looking at that weird, amalgamation of things that I like to do and saying, okay, who does that describe? Who does that? And honestly, it wasn't a straight shot. Like I applied to school for art therapy. I applied to a couple of schools here in New York that are actually some of the original art therapy schools. And I ended up choosing not to go because at that point, while I was waiting for my decisions, I got into a coaching program and just fell in love. I started to really see the power of, the kinds of solutions focused conversations that you can have as a coach. In fact, I stopped seeing my therapist for a while. I'm not saying it's not, I have to say it's not therapy. Ethically, like we have to say that it's not therapy. It's very different. But at the same time, like I went to go see my therapist. I forget, it was 2021. And there was just two or three sessions in a row where she's like, "What do you want to talk about?" I'm like, I don't know. Like I'm kind of on it. Like I'm doing all this coaching, I'm getting all this coaching, and I'm actually in action around all of these things that used to give me all this anxiety. So I think I'm kind of good for now. Um, yeah, that's the long short answer to your to your question.
I think that's really great. You kind of accepted, you acknowledged something was going on, right? You have to deal with it,
Yeah.
and everybody deals with it differently, right? And I like that your wife gave you some feedback and told you you weren't. I mean, that is really critical, important feedback. She knows
It,
you, right?
Yeah, she does. We've been married now, what, 2008. So that's 16, we've been together 18 years, married for 16. She knows me sometimes better than I do, as
Right.
happens. And I'm really grateful for the space that she gave me, and just even that she had the idea to do that. Um, so much of what I do when I'm working with people is really sort of helping people pay attention to what's available. Sometimes people are so focused on a goal that society says they need to have, maybe their families, their community say, oh, you really should, go do this, and they go that. But when we stop and really give ourselves space, you don't have to take a whole summer. I mean, that's a privilege that I had, but you can take time in various ways. And I've done this with lots of clients where they take that time and they let that kind of right brain, default mode brain thinking start to connect things that maybe this is where the creativity comes in, right? Like when people are looking for, even if they're just looking for the next job, or they want to start their own company based on the skill set that they have or the things that they enjoy, you got to step back. Or I've seen the best results when people step back and say, okay, like I want to start my own, creative agency. Okay, great. But what's different about that for you? Let's look at actually the things that matter to you, the relationships that matter to you, the conversations, what brings you joy? Like, what do you feel like? What do you think about your health? All these different aspects. And you can start to bring people go, oh, I can actually bring all of these things in an integrated way. It's not, see, I don't know if I don't know where I wrote this, but I think the whole work-life balance thing is BS. It's
Yes, I
because
agree. I
right,
agree.
okay, yeah, yeah. Yeah, I'm curious what you think about it.
I think it's more like having a rhythm in your life. You know what I'm saying? You have to have you got to kind of listen to your body. And I did a health coaching it helped me heal, right? And I did it I saw a holistic, like epidemiologist. I did what I call integrative health to help me heal
Hmm.
because it's not just, like taking a certain drug or a treatment. You still got to mentally, you have to help yourself. That is a major part of, as you know, and I think that's why creativity is really helpful. And I went kind of played around with that. I shouldn't say play, but I like to play. I like to have fun where I can, right? And I find I like to be around like-minded people. And I think um, creativity, like I think I mentioned before I started recording, people make fun of me for that. Like, yeah, that's just so dumb, focus on creativity. I'm like, why? It makes me happy, right? And I think it helps you look at all the options and it just sparks other ideas in you to solve a problem, right?
Well, absolutely. And I said this before the recording too, like, and I'll say this, and this is kind of like, blah blah, like, oh, we're all creative. Yeah, yeah, yeah. Okay, got it. But when you really actually engage with it, like when I work with people and really we'll do various exercises, journaling or or other sort of experiential things, even stuff to sort of get them in their body and get their mind calm and that kind of thing. When we when we really get creative about the things we want to do. I have a little sticky note here. I'll show you if you're watching the video. I have
Yeah.
one sticky note it says, how could it be done?
Oh, I like that.
And that's like, I mean, if there's like one question that's at the core of coaching, I think that's it. When someone's like, oh, I really want to do X, here's the path that I see people taking. I've got to do it this way, or I've got to kill it on social media, or I've got to do these are the things that I have to do. And I go, okay, well, how else could it be done? How else could you? What is the result that you're actually looking for? And
Right.
sometimes, I'm going to say most of the time, people come to me and they say, I want coaching around my business, or, something around like my personal life or some sort of transition. Maybe it's a big move. It could be, it's really all over the board, or starting an organization. Um, if I work with someone, say, like when I work with people, I typically work for like 3 or 6 months to start. It's a good amount of time to actually get things done. It's not too long. So, if it ends up not being a great fit, like we can still get a lot of value. But about 6 weeks in with literally everybody, we always find some kind of new path, some kind of new connection to what's actually really important underneath that. Why do you want to do all these things? Well, family's really important, or my health is really important, or my community, or the culture around me. There's always something deeper that we find when we do allow ourselves to be in that sort of expansive, creative thinking, but expansive thinking.
Right. I really love that perspective because you just need someone who like, like a coach to ask you the right questions and to listen to the responses, because it's kind of helpful not to have someone who knows you too much, right? Because you're going to ask other questions. Does that make sense?
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah,
and
definitely.
I was wondering if you did one-on-one coaches or do you have any group coaches? I was just curious.
Yeah, actually, I do both. Mo Mostly if if someone's looking to engage with me, mostly we start with one-on-one. I do have a group program. I'm actually we've run it. Let's see, we've run it twice now. We ran it twice last year. The new group is starting tomorrow.
Oh, cool.
Well, whenever this podcast comes out, it will have started a
It'll
couple
be
weeks before
it'll
that.
be out already.
Yeah, no, it'll be out already. But yeah, so it's a the group is really great. And I say that because other people have said it. I'm not just tooting my own horn. Like the things that people have said. You can see some videos that I have on my website, and but it's a group for creatives. Writers, musicians, but I get a lot of painters and artists because that's my background. So people go, "Oh, he gets it." What surprises people is that it's not an art course. I'm not teaching you how to. I used to teach art. I'm not teaching you how to do anything on there. We do, and I'll explain that. My ADHD is kind of popping me off on all these like side
That's
stories.
okay.
But but what it is, and it's not a business course either. People go, oh, like I want to grow my business. I'm like, you can get that. People have started new businesses through the work that they do in this course, but we don't teach you how to do that. We have a group of people who, and many of them know how to do that, so we're all sharing information, but it is a course about some of the stuff that we're talking about. How do you connect more deeply with your values and really connect with a vision for the future? And that vision includes what are the values that you're really living and embodying and spreading in your family, your communities, and then who are you being to do that? And what is getting even deeper, like what is the underlying purpose? Like what is your why? What are you here for? I know it sounds like a really big thing, but there are ways to kind of get there, to play with that, to fine tune it. It may change over years, but we do a lot of that, and we look at, I bring a lot of my coach training into that. So working people through something that's called the neurological levels. And this is, you've heard of, yeah, I see a nod.
Yes.
The
Yeah.
I think it was Richard or Robert Dilts who came up with this. He's written a lot about it, but it's basically kind of a framework for transformation or transition, and it talks about how like you can do things in the sort of material or executive kind of way. Like I can change my environment, I can go learn a new skill, I can get a new habit. That's all good, and what creates the truly deepest transformation for people where they're actually really embodying and living into that sort of more aligned, uh, purposeful career or life or whatever is when you work at those higher levels, when you're looking at that vision and your identity, who you want to be, and what is your why, that kind of thing.
And you're helping them figure it out. And it just take a deep dive sometimes. And the creative process allows you to just play with, I shouldn't say play with things, but I call it playing, and to
Yeah,
figure
I
out
mean, I agree. I would use the
it
same
is.
word. Yeah.
Yeah, you figure out what your path needs to be. And we all have that in different phases of our life. Is that the right word?
Yeah.
And after it's not about me, but the cancer stuff, it was a different phase of my life. I am still here, right? And that's really what it was about and what I should focus on. And that was getting feedback from others, not just my husband, right?
Yeah.
And,
Yeah.
and and that's really, really, really helpful. And that's why I was asking about the group thing. I've had, experiences with both, and I've learned in a group thing. I'm sure that's what your group's up to. You learn how you can apply your values and your skill set to that group when you work off of each other, right?
Yeah. I mean, obviously I looked you up and I read a bit about your journey. I mean, I can only imagine what the what kind of transformation or transition that had to have been for you. I imagine that what you were doing before and what you're doing after the cancer and the brain stuff had to be really different.
Right. You definitely appreciate life more while you're here. And you
Yeah.
definitely just appreciate everything. And I learned what was important to me. And I got back into running. I think
Oh
People
yeah.
think that's weird, but whatever. I like it. I get that runner's high. I don't do it every day, but I told my doctors I want to run again. And so I'd have physical therapy. You have to be aware of that. It's not push yourself, and I know that. But I get joy out of that. That's one of the things I do. And right, and I've helped people focus more on rather than pushing, should say pushing. I did it in the corporate world. Right now I'm have my own business
Hmm.
as my clients like we like your perspective and the value that I give to them. And I needed that, right? Because you when you're going through a health issue, any kind you like, am I worth it? I'm sure you understand what I'm saying. And right.
Absolutely. I mean, I've never gone through what you went through.
Mhm.
And even, even on a small scale, like it's sort of the hardest times for everybody is going to be relative. Like my hardest time, but it doesn't take away anything from the fact that whatever I was going through was a struggle for me. And
Correct.
and you got through something, and like you said, you have a deeper appreciation of life. Something that we talk about in the group. I mean, it would be I would love to talk to you more about it too.
Mhm.
Is what is it? You almost were, not almost, you were sort of, there was a forced transformation. Like, you
I
had
had no choice, right?
right.
But I chose but I asked because I'm curious. I asked the right questions, and met with doctors who were willing to have a patient ask questions, and that's why I joke that I'm a PETA. I'm sure you know what PETA means, pain in the ass.
No, Peter.
I'm kidding.
I didn't.
No, because I wanted to know. Like I had sons, they were when the first cancer came, they were in elementary school, right?
Wow. Wow.
And it just came out, all the stuff came out of the blue. But I talked to someone the other day there. She said, Bridget, you should be thankful that your breast cancer was discovered because that's how the brain tumor was discovered. I'm like, right? And like I never really thought of it from that perspective. And but because I'm one of those people, listen to your body, get your checkups, and the sooner rather than later. And some people blow it off, which is whatever. I can't say that it's good or bad, but I listened to myself and I looked at, like you said, like my sons and my husband, and I had dogs that were my support system. I love dogs, and they were
Yeah,
my.
we have two dogs. I love
We
my guy.
understand, right?
Yeah.
They were just because they remind you to be in the moment, right? Dogs remind you, it's okay to
They're
walk.
always in the moment. They're just in the
Right.
moment.
Right. And that's what I'm saying. It's just stuff like that rather than let's go, 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 because I was in that environment beforehand. I think our culture may be that way. It's just go, 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 go. You got to get all this stuff done.
Well,
Right.
and that's it. And I'm hearing you say this, and it really resonates with me, this idea that, I mean, we do live in a go, go, go world. And like, it's great. Like, go be successful, go build your empire.
Right. Right.
And, my, like, I train jujitsu and I talk about it all the time. I joke, the first rule of Jujitsu Club is always talk about Jujitsu Club.
That's cool.
Um, but, I go every day, and, but, I'm not in there like, like going crazy and like trying to murder everybody. Um, because my goal isn't my goal. My goal isn't to like crush it and whatever, tech bros are
Right.
doing these days. My goal, like I say to my training partners, I said, look, my goal in this sparring session that we're going to do, my goal is for both of us to come back tomorrow. That's what I
That's
want.
good.
I want both of us to show up tomorrow, and for tomorrow, 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 until we have to stop. And I feel the same way about this. We were talking about this like life balance, right? Like you can focus so much on sort of work and life being so equal. Work is just one of the slices of the pie of life. And I think when people start to really engage, I mean, you say, okay, yeah, I get it, I get it. But when you really start to engage with it and start to really examine the different areas of your life and start to almost make them equally weighted to these things, you start to say, well, it's okay. Not to say like, oh, let's be lazy, but like it's okay to put my energy into this, and also put my energy into, I want to go running. Like, there's other things that you could be doing. I'm sure you could be like doing stuff on social media or working with clients or all this stuff, but like I train jujitsu, like I said, every day. And when someone says they want to meet with me before 11 a.m., I say, well, that's not possible for me because
Right.
I'm really
Right.
clear that this
Yes.
is good for me, my body, my mental health. And I want to like, if I'm not doing, it's been a while, but if I'm not doing that and I'm like, oh, I'm too busy, I'm not my best self. I'm not my best self with my
Right.
kids, not with my wife, not with my friend. Like, I'm just not there. So finding striking that balance sometimes I think in this culture feels like you're not doing it right. I completely disagree. I completely disagree.
Yeah,
And I
we're
want to,
all,
like you said, I want to surround myself with people who really get that, who really get that balance, who want to play, who want to have fun. And so much of the progress that we make in these other areas of our life will come through that play. It'll surprise you.
yeah, you're right on 100%. And I just love your perspective and your understanding and the, I like how you're doing that particular, I should say exercise, but a goal every day. And it just helps you because you can still do it. And that's the same with my run. I walk every day, and though I live near woods, so I walk every day. But then
Oh, that's
now
nice.
I running, I just something about it. I need that, I don't know what it is
Do you
to
take your dogs
run.
on the run? Do they run with you?
Oh, I have two Pyrenees. They'll kill me. I'm just kidding. But I do. They're not. They're like, no, thank you. But I do have I had a chocolate lab at one point. He was my running buddy, right? And he was. Certain breeds are made for that, right? Now we walk the piers every day. They need it too.
Yeah.
The
Oh yeah.
Pyrenees, and they're adopted, and that's another thing. We have a. I've always been an animal lover, and I think that again, deep down, calms me down or something. You know what I'm saying? Just like brings me again in the moment. And I just like nature. You've got to surround yourself. I think I'm so glad my husband found this house that we've lived here for 2 decades, but it was you can't build behind us because the Corps of Engineer property is behind us. You know what I'm saying? It backs up to that kind of foliage, and,
Yeah.
and because we live near a lake, that's part of it. But that was
Sounds
important to
amazing.
my right. It was important to my husband, and he's the one that found this house. I'm like, perfect, right? Because that was important to him. And so that's one thing we're total opposite. I think that helps too in a relationship where we have commonalities, but we're total opposites too. I don't know if you and your wife are the same way.
There's areas where we are really, really aligned. And I
Yes,
think there's areas where it's actually important that we're not. Um,
correct.
yeah, I work with the Enneagram. Sometimes like when someone chooses to work with me for, a 3 or 6 month period, I have access to these tests and I'll send someone a test just because I want to understand. I want to understand if they do that test, does it actually resonate with them? And if it doesn't,
Yes,
we can kind of move on.
right.
But if it does, my wife is a very different type than I am. And we actually balance each other out, I think, really, really well in that regard. Like with my wife, with family stuff, I do more of the like, school drop off and that kind of organization stuff. But then there's areas where like it's really her. Like my son I'm very proud of him. He just got into his top choice for high schools here in New
Awesome.
York and actually a couple school outside of New York. So we're really proud of him. And my wife was the one who really sat with him and helped him with test prep and that other kind of stuff. That wasn't, for me, that was like a very frustrating experience. So I was glad she got to take that. And I'll cook dinner. I'll do the grocery shopping. Like we have a good balance on where we engage, even with the kids. So
That's true. That helps with your relationships with the whole family, not just you and your wife. And because the kids see that connection that you guys have. And you want to be a good role model where you can. And I think to go back to my husband, I think one of the reasons we connected, our parents are both divorced about the same, we're both like
hmm,
15, right? And that I mean, I didn't know him then, but not, so we learned, um, being around our parents. That makes sense. And of course, he acted out differently. He was, yeah, he acted out much wilder. I was just like, yeah, whatever. I probably ran a lot more. No, but we are totally opposite. But we like nature and we like dogs. How's that? So that's and exploring. I think that's important.
Yeah,
Um,
what's curious for me, we don't have to get into it now. I'd be
yeah,
curious. Maybe you'll join me on my podcast
yeah,
sometime. But I'm always curious about, when someone goes through a significant transformation, because I talk about this on my blog. One of the most difficult things is about doing that is that we've set up our lives around us, and especially if you're in your 40s or 50s, like, you're in some sort of rhythm, and it's hard to break out of that. Part of the reason that it's hard to break out of that is you've created a life around a certain set of habits or way of being, and then when you're like, I want to change this. Sometimes the people around you are like, we kind of like the way that you were. If you could just kind of, they try to sort of
yes,
shove you back into that
right,
shape. So I'm always curious when someone goes through a significant transformation, how it is that they brought the people along with them. Were there people who kind of faded away? Were there new people who came in? How did the people
right,
who stuck through from before and after, how did they engage with that? Did they actually experience a transformation
right.
through, being with you around that, right? Because if you think about it like you're a shape or something, like a puzzle piece, and if you're fitting with somebody else and your shape changes, well, their shape has to change too. So how does that show up for different people?
That's
I'm always
true.
fascinated with that stuff.
It is. It's your support system is so important. It can change. And that's just the scary thing when you have a health issue is this your support system, right? Um, and you just want to be I'm just so fortunate, really. My
It sounds like you had not to say it was a great experience, but
right, but we bond and I thought there's a lot of women who lose their husbands over breast cancer. I'm not kidding you. And I'm
no, I
just
believe it. Yeah.
right. It's terrible. I just don't under. So I was that stupid fear was in my. I can't believe I'm saying this, but that fear came out of me. Like he's gonna. He didn't. He stayed and supported me. So he knew, I had value to him still, and that's why we. I don't know. We connected and getting me all. Oh, I'm all happy thinking about that. One thing I wanted to mention is I noticed the word leadership stuff is just so prevalent now. Is that the right word? So how do you think creativity or coaching has to do with leadership?
Mm.
Just
I mean, that's a very, very broad question. I would say
yeah,
what comes up first for me is that, and there's a lot of research around this, is that, when you have organizations that really embody a culture of coaching, employees are happier, the results they get are better, people feel more rested, they feel more connected, they're happier at home, like all of these things. When you have a culture of coaching, so what does that actually mean? Um, there's lots of specific things, and it sort of depends on what the team looks like. But when the leadership is invested um, in the employees or the staff in achieving their best selves, let's just say broad strokes,
right.
then that is felt, and people will give more, people will give more to the work if they feel that connection to kind of their own purpose within the work. Now that means a few things, is that sometimes if you have a culture, not everyone's coachable. That's just the truth. Not everyone's really available for that kind of conversation. I've worked at an organization like that where people were just not receptive to the idea of that kind of conversation, and it didn't work. It didn't work when that was offered, and that approach was offered. The organization also fell apart because there wasn't that openness and that trust that you create in a coaching conversation. You don't have to
That's
be a coach. You don't have to like go get coach
right,
training as a leader, but there's a kind of mindset. It's a growth mindset, it's a vulnerability mindset. And I'm not saying vulnerable like you have to go and cry in front of everyone. Like, I'm just saying, like, there's when, especially, I live in New York, and the corporate world in New York is pretty like cutthroat, right? And everyone's like, kind of in their silos and trying to, not sharing information, whatever. I think
right.
that's a stereotype, but it's a stereotype because it exists. But the places that are truly, truly open, and to be that, like, you have to be willing to sit in discomfort sometimes. You have to be willing to sit in a little bit of fear. But the way that I like to think about it is, if you approach everything, I mean, this is going to sound however it sounds, but if you approach everything almost like it's an experiment. You know, like we're gonna try this. And if you're doing it that way, then you're also talking to your employees, you're talking to your staff, and you're saying, what's important to you here? You know, we may not do everything that everybody wants to do, but like we want to understand what's important to you about this, and maybe we can actually bring that in, and maybe it'll make it better. Whatever the idea is. Maybe it's a product idea or a way of organizing. Um, I was working with someone who's an advisor to the president, Joe Biden. And we did a bit of work around exactly that. Like, what is the kind of communication? What is the kind of work, that you want to be doing? And she had a lot of freedom with what she was doing in terms of the consulting work and her own organizations, but she ended up building her own organizations and with some of these ideas, I think, with some of these ideas around, having people who are truly invested in their own growth, not someone who's just there to sort of like clock in and clock out. Like that exists and that's fine. The world needs lots of different kinds of things. But when we're talking about an organization that's truly going to thrive and not just survive, like I know you believe in order to thrive, we have to be connected to that I mean, even in a somatic way, but I won't get too woo-woo on the podcast.
Oh, no, that's
Um,
okay. Yeah, I understand what you're saying. It's,
yeah.
it's, I just asked that question because I see that word leadership constantly everywhere. And it's really, about, I don't know, I don't know what it's really about. I believe in it, right? You want to be a good role model. That's kind of how I see it.
I
And then
think,
connecting
yeah,
to people.
I think maybe the easiest way that I know to think about it is when I'm working with people who are in leadership, the way, we can sit there and strategize and say, okay, like you should have a company meeting every morning, like you can do all that stuff. You can hire a consultant and they can give you a map to like how to organize your day. I do that with people too, but like that's not the real juice, I think, is when people connect to this idea of self-leadership. I know that's coming up a lot too, but just the idea that you are actually looking deeply at, what matters to you and making choices, creating habits, killing old habits that are actually having you live those values. And it might be uncomfortable, like I said about the puzzle piece shape. Like it might be like, okay,
Mhm.
like this isn't the way that I was before. But going back to what we were talking about right at the beginning, if you can create that vision for how you want to be in the future, you can start creating it. But that's essentially what I believe self leadership is connecting to that and then saying, okay, if that's the future I'm going to, what are the decisions that I need to be making now? What are the tough decisions sometimes, or the tough conversations, or sometimes the conversations are easy. It's not to say it's always hard, but you look at the future, you use the future to design the present.
That's true. Look at the future and to not, you got to get yourself unstuck sometimes. And I think that why I like
Yeah.
what you're saying, your conversational style, and you're asking the right questions. And I did a lot of corporate stuff too, and that's kind of why the leadership thing keeps popping up occasionally.
Yeah.
But every industry is changing, and it always has, but it just seems to be faster for some reason. So, and I'm sure tech has a lot to have
I
amplified it
think
a
so
little
too.
bit,
Yeah.
is the right word. And people, or some people are just afraid, right? And I've always been a risk taker, which is good and bad, but which is good and bad. And I think it's my upbringing, being around, um, I was raised around the military, by the way. I was a military brat, so you're a little bit more risky, right? But I don't do dangerous stuff. I always the nurturer. I'm the nurturer in my group. Or some, I'm the mom. I
Yeah, I get that. I'm getting that about it. Just from what I've read about you and talking to you now,
I
I
don't know
I
why.
can
That's
feel
just my name. That's that's me. And but I try not to be. Well, the only person that says I'm bossy is my husband.
it.
Just depends what we need done. No, this is really fantastic, and I just love that you're sharing this and your kids. You mentioned you had kids. How are they in high school now? Right?
My son is
Oh,
13.
okay,
He's starting high school
okay,
this fall.
fun.
God,
Right.
crazy. And my daughter's 8, and so she'll be going into, well, she's in third grade now. So
Yeah, I remember that time. And now I just enjoy it and embrace it because once they get 17 or, oh, trust me, they're gonna have a little attitude, but,
Oh, we're I feel
nobody there.
like you said, everything's going faster. I feel like even like we've been getting some I won't out them on this podcast, but one of them has been really kind of in a state recently and really sort of testing some let's just say some attitude boundaries
Right.
with
Well,
us.
it's true. And I joke that I have a mom of boys and I survived it, Mark.
Yeah.
Yeah, I, yeah, I survived it. And
But
that was,
I
I
mean, it's
guess,
also another area where I think the mindset that you and I are talking about
uh-huh,
comes in handy. Like, you know, we did have kind of a rough couple of weeks with one of the kids, and
yeah.
um, you know, like talking about the balance with your partner. um you know, my wife does a lot of this. It's not to say that like she never steps in and is able to hold space for the kids, but you know, there was one that we felt was like a little bit more kind of serious, like what is going on. And I was able to, and we'll see what happens next week, right? Like, you know, you have kids, and like I say it's
Right.
great, and then, you know, of course I'll say it's great now and I'll go later, she'll come back, it'll be terrible. But you know, the again, it's like back to that culture of coaching and self-leadership. Like how would I want to be treated in this situation that my kid is, you know, having a really
That's
hard
true.
time? How do you know what is the space that I would want for myself? And to give that, you know, to give that to this kid and to have them takes time, a lot of patience, you know, to sit there while someone's like losing their mind.
Right. It's,
And
yeah,
eventually they understand that they're in a safe space. I mean, that's a lot of what we create in the coaching space. We just when we're having this conversation is and it sounds so cliche, like, oh yeah, safe space. I get it. But you know, what I've heard over and over and over again from people who work with me is that like one comment I get a lot is I say, you know, what did you get out of the conversation or what did you get out of this week or whatever? And they say, well, God, I never really talked about whatever, you know, before. I never really felt like I was able to talk about this thing before. And so when I talk about safe space, I'm not this is not just lip service. This is real. Like there's, you know, I have some clients who like I know some stuff that you know nobody else knows because it's a confidential space and there's no judgment. So it like when we create these spaces, I feel very fortunate that I had the good and terrible experiences that I've had that, you know, got me to go and take, you know, do this training so that I can do this. And now I'm working with these groups and with these clients and they're going off into their worlds and creating those spaces. It's really, I mean, it's really a beautiful thing.
I love that you're taking your, what you learned and helping others in your way, the best way to do it. I think that is really awesome. I just think coaching, we need more coaches than people realize. We really, truly do. I mean, that's my personal opinion. And
You're not going to get an argument from me on that
right, no, I mean,
one.
I think people like downsize it for some reason, but they're downsizing it maybe because, like you said, it could be uncoachable. I
Yeah,
don't
I
know.
mean, there's this myth that you know the sort of the American dream, if you will, this sort of you know doing you know do self-made person and doing it on your
Yes,
own,
that's
all this
true.
stuff. You know, I saw a great interview with Arnold Schwarzenegger. It was a recent interview, and somebody was saying, you know, wow, you are truly a self-made man. You know, you grew up in Austria. You know, I think dad was a plumber, like didn't have money, and you like went and created, you know, blah blah blah. He said that's BS. I said, what are you talking about? Like you know, no one else did it for you. You didn't have like family money, whatever. He said, yeah, but I had, you know, I had this kind of support from my parents. And I had and when I went to California, like this person showed up for me and this and this and this. So like yes, I like with coaching, like yes, you know, the person is doing the work and you're getting the support of someone or if in your life with you know many someones. So I don't subscribe to this idea of you know self you know made anything. And
Right.
I can say that because I've had the experience, the support of you know my family, my wife, you know my brother, my coaches, you know my mentors, my teachers. I can point to a dozen or 100 people in my past who have had a really key impact on my life, even in a small way. I'm still actually in touch on Facebook with my fifth grade art teacher,
That's
um,
awesome.
which
Awesome.
is so wild. You know, she was, but she was. You know, this might be an interesting kind of point or final point here is that I remember being in her class, and I have this one very specific memory where we were supposed to make a pot, And if you're watching the video, you can see like you make just a cylinder, right? Like this. And I had this idea in my head that I was going to actually turn it. Like I was like, oh, I think if I turn the top of the cylinder in and bend it, I can kind of make a smile, right? Like you take a circle and you like bend
Oh,
it in like that. And then I could add a couple eyes on top and legs. It could be like a frog. But I was a little bit of an introvert. I didn't tell anybody. I just started kind of doing it. Now, what ended up happening is I've got a cylinder and I've got these two big round things with little dots in the middle that I put on there, and everyone's like, "Ha ha, it looks like a woman," and teasing me about it. Everyone thought I was doing like a nude lady, and I'm, it's fifth grade, right?
right.
Um, and I just remember Miss Purdy, if you're listening to this, I remember Miss Purdy basically shooing everybody away, saying, "Give him, see what he does. This is, I don't know what this is gonna." She didn't know either. I didn't tell her. And it's, I mean, it's still like one of the most favorite pieces of art that, I've ever made. My parents still have it. She was kind enough to like actually she really liked it. So she glazed it herself. She did like a nice job. Like I was gonna ruin it, but like I was fifth grade. But
Right.
but she did a really nice job glazing it and helped me finish it. But what she did was she created space for me. She created space for my creativity. If I didn't have that, I would have probably succumbed to the peer pressure saying, just do it like everybody else and just make
Right.
a really good cylinder. But back to the sticky note, how could it be done? I had a different idea and I was
That's
given that
true.
space. So that's one of my earliest, sort of formative memories of the kind of support that we get. So it's not like she built my career, but that moment has been so formative for me. I still think about that and how important that was to say like you can actually you can actually take space for this kind of thing and see what happens.
That's a beautiful story, a memory, and that you still are connected to her. Teachers are
Yeah.
so important too. Teachers
Yeah.
are undervalued. I think we just, I grew up, my dad that raised me, my mom's second husband was a science teacher. So it just made me think of that stuff. And he actually did experiments at home and I should not have been involved in, but anyhow, we did, but
I'm not saying every experiment goes well, but that's part of what you
right.
said is
Well,
that
it's just,
creative mindset.
he was like, I think back on that, he's like, yeah, you're curious. It's okay. But then you still gotta, you know, I know, listen to what's important to you. And I love that you're opening up your story and sharing what you're doing to help others. So this has been awesome. Where can people learn more about you, Mark?
I am on LinkedIn, just my name, Marc Scheff. It's Mark with a C. Scheff is my last name. If you're interested in learning more about my coaching, it's Marc Scheff Coaching. I'm on Instagram, same name. And my group program is it's the Unleash Creativity Club, and it's unleashcreativity.club.
That's awesome. And for those that are listening, I'll have the links included in the description page. This was awesome. I love connecting with someone who likes creativity and understands the power of it. Thank you
Agreed.
again
Thank
so
you so
much.
much for having me. This was a pleasure.
All right. Have a great rest of your day, guys.